Can Maryland football take another step in recruiting?
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, video content creator for 247 Sports and InsideMarylandSports.com, and host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you for making us part of your day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. I want to talk about Maryland football and their recruiting, if they can take another step up in recruiting and take on a new level to recruiting that can really take our program, our team to the next level. Everybody knows college football. Really, the number one thing, in my opinion, is you can say like coaching, you can say the actual players on your team, but it really all starts with recruiting. And a lot of how well your coach does, how successful your coach is going to be is going to come down to recruiting, how well you recruit in your area, how well do you recruit outside of your area. And for Maryland football to take another step up in the Big Ten, where we don't stall as a program, we don't stall in the Coach Locksley era, I think it has to be in recruiting for Maryland football. We've seen Coach Locksley do some really cool things in recruiting. We've seen them get a couple players that maybe we weren't supposed to get, a couple players that maybe people didn't think we would get, whether that's a Rakeem Jarrett when he was a 4-star, whether that's Chop Robinson, who just got drafted to the NFL, whether that's Jashawn Barham, who just transferred to Michigan from Maryland. Maryland football seems to be able to get a couple players usually that you probably think we are not supposed to get. But year in and year out, it feels like we've kind of are around the same spot in recruiting. We're about like the 35th best recruiting class in the country, which isn't a terrible spot to be, not a bad spot at all. But for Maryland football to take another step as a program, I really believe that they have to learn how to get into the top 25 in terms of recruiting classes. We're not going to be a top 10, not top 15 recruiting class. We're not really going to have that. That's not really realistic, but I think we can be a team that can get into the top 25. And I think this 2025 class has a chance to be a really good class and one of the better classes that Coach Locksley has had. But for Maryland football to take the next step in recruiting, it's going to come through take the next step as a program, it's going to come through recruiting. And there's a couple players that I was looking through that I've said that are in the DMV area that you feel Maryland football should be able to get some of these guys, some of these higher rated recruiting guys. A lot of them are projected to go to Ohio State or some other programs in the country. But I was just looking at Maryland in terms of their top players in the class of 2025, and I wanted to focus on some of those guys because I just recently saw that Blake Woodby, who was a guy that I thought maybe we would have a shot to get, but we didn't. He ended up committing to Ohio State, but he did the decommit from Ohio State today. Blake Woodby is the 95th best player according to 247, number 9 cornerback in the class, second in the state of Maryland. One of the better players in the class of 2025, exactly the kind of kid that we would want out of St. Francis, and he just decommitted from Ohio State, which is interesting. You wonder if a kid like that can Maryland get into the mix. And he's just one example of a guy that's where it's like, if we can land a couple more of these guys where it's like, we'll get maybe one or two of those type of players in a class. Like this year we got Brandon Jacobs, really good player, 4-star. He's going to be a starter, I think, next year. He's going to be a top-end player. We were able to switch Braden Lee, who had been a really highly recruited player, had multiple offers from South Carolina, but it's like you got to get a more complete class through and throughout where it's like less of the 3-stars, to be completely honest, and more of the highly talented 4-star players that a lot of programs covet if you want to take the next step as a program. And I don't know if it's possible. I don't know if it's feasible because a lot of it comes down to NIL and those type of things. But if Maryland football wants to be able to one day look at the program and say, it's in a pretty good spot where we're consistently a top 25 team. We're in a good conference, and we're able to compete in the conference, and maybe we're not like competing for national championships. I don't expect that, but we're a bowl team every single year. Maybe one year we can slip into the extended college football playoff. If Maryland ever wants to take that step as a program, they have to take the next step in recruiting. They have to get some more of these DMV guys. And it's not just any of the DMV guys. We get plenty of DMV guys. Like over 50% of our roster is from either DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and I'm including like Baltimore area in that. But that was a really interesting stat. But the thing is, like, you got to get the top DMV guys. And I'm looking through the top DMV guys. Like, I'm looking through the top Maryland guys, top DC guys, the top Virginia guys. A lot of those kids aren't going to Maryland. The top five kids in Maryland, a lot of those guys aren't going to Maryland. And for Maryland to take another step, you got to get a couple of those guys. You got to probably have 8 4-stars or something like that, 7 4-stars, maybe 6 4-stars that are from the DMV area, because there's plenty of them in recruiting. Like, I'm looking at this Fahim Delane guy who seems to be, Maryland seems to be somewhat in the mix. He's one of the top safeties. 247 has him as the number 3 ranked safety in the class of 2025, 6'2" from Good Counsel, right next to Maryland. And it says Maryland's warm, but it says he's 100% to Ohio State. So that basically means that he's going to Ohio State. Those projections are usually right. And he's the number 1 player in Maryland. And I'm thinking a guy like this, a guy that's a borderline 5-star, he's right there. He's not quite there, but he's right there. That's the type of guy that you can't let get out of your hands. It's a guy that you want to start potentially maybe finding ways to get guys like that. I don't know if we need to figure it out with NIL. I don't know exactly, but you want to figure it out with the guys like that. And Malik Washington, the guy that's the cover on this, is the thumbnail on this video, is because he's a guy that I really do believe that we can land. I believe that we can land Malik Washington. I think we have a pretty good shot at him. He's another kid you can't let slip away. A 4-star quarterback from Maryland, from Spalding. It's very close to the University of Maryland. 4th ranked player, Maryland, 14th ranked QB. He's the type of player that I've said you cannot let this type of guy slip away. You can't let this type of guy get away. And he's got other really good offers, but for Maryland to take the next step in recruiting, you have to get some of these guys. And I know you're not going to get all of them because Ohio State's, the Bamas of the world are coming in and dipping in on these type of players. But there's players down the line. Jeff Exenor, who is from McDonough School, where I actually used to go, is a really good player, 4-star recruit, 210th ranked player in the class, same school that Dante Trader and Preston Howard went to. And so you got to look at some of these guys down here, and you got to say you got to be able to land some of these guys, some of these players. Cortez Harris, a defensive edge, ranked 117th in the 2025 class. He's warm to Maryland, but also Penn State, also Tennessee, also Virginia Tech. You gotta start being able to land some of these guys if you want to take the next step as a program. Because if you look at Maryland and if you look at college football as a whole, the top teams every single year are always the teams that are top in recruiting, are teams that land in the top 10 recruiting classes, top 15 recruiting classes, top 5 recruiting classes, the Georgias, the Bamas, the Clemsons, the Ohio States, the LSUs, the Penn States, those type of schools, the Oregons now in our conference, those type of schools are able to recruit at the highest level. And then in this new Big Ten, we might get years where we don't have the best schedule, and I'm not saying we're going to be able to win it, but you can put together a really solid Big Ten season and maybe compete for a pretty big-time bowl. And it starts with recruiting, getting some of these guys that you aren't able to get. And Maryland basketball, something happened with Maryland basketball where the NIL money has started to come up, because we landed 5-star Derek Queen. We were able to do a lot of big things in the transfer portal. Something happened with Maryland basketball in recruiting and their NIL money, because I don't think we would have been able to get some of these guys if it wasn't, if we didn't have the same type of change and the same type of NIL money that I'm hearing about. But Maryland football needs to find a way to up that NIL. I know it's not easy. I know you have to spread the wealth around too, and that makes it hard. There's so many guys on a football roster, but I think Maryland's got to figure out how to get that NIL up. That's going to be one of the biggest things in being able to get some of these guys. These guys will go if you pay them enough, and that's just what the present day college football is. But if Maryland wants to take the next step as a program, right now we're like, okay, we're consistent. We've been an 8-7 win team the last couple of years. We put up winning records. We've won 3 straight bowl games. But eventually that's going to get stale, and it's going to be like, is this our mountain? Like, is this what we're supposed to be? Is this the maximum we are able to reach? Is this our ceiling as a program? I hope not. But realistically, it could possibly be. Or does Coach Lockley find a way to take a step up in recruiting? And he's done a pretty good job. I do want to emphasize that he's gotten a lot of really good players, but is he going to be able to take the next step up in recruiting? And it's like, oh, wow, like Maryland football just landed this kid, this 4-star from Good Counsel or whatever. And, they just got this 4-star edge from Upper Marble, Maryland, or they get this other kid from Virginia. Like, you know what I mean? Like, can Maryland get to that part where they're like, wow, we're really able to recruit at a high level? And it's not going to be like top 10. That's not what it's going to be. But can they get to a level where it's pretty high level and they're able to get some of these guys? Even if you go into just the District of Columbia, the DC ratings, there's a couple of kids that are up there in recruiting. There's this Winston kid from Gonzaga right in Washington, DC, that's ranked as a really high 4-star. There's Tariq Hare from St. John's, a safety. There's plenty of safeties, it sounds like. So you want to be able to get some of these players that are really high-level guys that you should be able to get in recruiting. And that will allow Maryland football to get to a next step, to get to a spot that I don't think that I've seen us be able to compete at. And I think that we should be able to play at that level if some more NIL money comes in, which is easier said than done. I don't know how you figure that out, but you got to be able to figure out if you want to be able to compete in the Big Ten and really take the next step as a program. You got to start landing some of these 2025s overall. I want to talk about Deshawn Harris-Smith. Let's talk a little bit of Maryland basketball. Can Deshawn Harris-Smith take a leap as a player? I will tell you about that after this ad from FanDuel. It's winner take all in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. You guys got to get on FanDuel before the NBA and NHL playoffs are over. I know a lot of you guys are watching those series, whether it's the Denver series with the Timberwolves, or if you're watching whatever series you're watching, the OKC series, whatever series you're watching right now, OKC versus Luka and Kyrie and the Mavericks, you can bet on all those different things. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. You guys have to get on FanDuel if you want to bet Kyrie over on points or Luka Doncic over on points or SGA over on points. You can do that all on FanDuel. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So I want to talk about Deshawn Harris-Smith. We haven't talked about him in a while, and I think he's kind of gotten overshadowed by a lot of that's been going on, the transfer portal and all the different players that we're getting and all the different players that have committed to Maryland and all the different talk about all the new guys. And Deshawn Harris-Smith is one of the lone freshmen that stayed. And I love the fact that he's still a Maryland Terrapin. I think he had a weird year for sure for Maryland basketball. He came in with a lot of expectations with being a top 27 player in the class, number 27 ranked player, and he came in with a ton of expectations. But at the end of the day, I don't want to say he hasn't lived up to them, because he still has a lot of time to be able to do that. But I don't think he lived up to what he thought he would be freshman year, what a lot of us thought he would be freshman year. But he still has a big opportunity to turn it around and to fix things. And I think that Deshawn Harris-Smith, I think because of his work ethic, how I see him play, I think that he can improve next year. And I think that he can make a huge leap going into his sophomore year. I'm going ahead and saying that I think he will make a humongous leap heading into his sophomore year. So as a freshman, Absolutely, he struggled. There's no its and buts. There's really nothing else to say except for that he struggled as a player. The statistics weren't great. He played around 30 minutes a game, and Kevin Willard always trusts him, started just about every game, but the shooting percentages were not where they need to be at all. At all. They were horrible, to be honest. Shot 36.8% from the field, which is what we probably want him shooting from three about. He shot 20% from the 3-point line, which is just not going to get it done in the Big Ten, and shot 58% from the free throw line. And so he needs to improve literally in every single shooting category. And his game was always kind of get down low and find his game at the bucket, find his game at the rim, whether it's driving layups, floater game. That's really his game. His game's not shooting the ball, but to open up that, he has to be a better shooter of the ball because people would kind of just I was surprised because I thought people would let him shoot more than they actually did. Like, I thought people were going to get so disrespectful and just leave him wide open. There'd be games where sometimes he would hit, but like I thought it was going to get more disrespectful. But for him to open up more of his inside game, he's got to get the outside shot going. And I really do believe that he can. I think with the summer of work, knowing that's exactly what he has to work on, I think it will get better. And I believe it will get better because we saw some games he did shoot like a pretty good percentage from three. In his last game against Wisconsin, it gave me hope for him to be a really good player for us in the future. In our tournament, in the Big Ten tournament game where we got absolutely blitzed and got run off the floor and we lost 87-56. He still did a really good job. He shot 75% from three. He shot 40% from the field, and he only had one turnover, 3 assists. He really showed that he can be a good player. Only shot 33% from the free throw line, though. And so he's leaving a lot of points at the free throw line for sure, shooting 52%. That's just not going to get it done for him. But that game gave me hope for him as an outside shooter, and he got better as the year went on for sure. And I think his game all around is really good. I just think it's his shooting. I think he's a really good passer of the basketball. I think that he's a really good rebounding guard. I think he's a really good defender. I think he does so many different things well, except for shooting the ball. But shooting the ball will make everything else kind of seem like they don't really matter. Like that's just what it is. It's going to get overshadowed. Everything can get overshadowed by his shooting stats. But I really do believe that the summer of work, he's going to get better because I saw in spots, I saw him shoot well. I saw him shoot well against Penn State, where he had 9 points, shot 50% from three, 50% from the field. I saw him have a really good game there. I saw against Northwestern, he was one of our better players, where he had 14 points. And that was without the 3-point shot going. I saw him get 17 against Iowa and shoot 2 for 3 from the 3-point line. It was definitely a pattern. When he shot pretty good from the 3-point line, he usually had a pretty good game overall. Like I'm looking at some of these stats. I'm looking at against Alcorn State, which is not a good team at all. He shot 3 for 4 from the 3-point line, and he had 12 points. So the games where he played well in particular, it's because he shot the ball at a high level and he shot the ball well from the 3-point line. So if he can get that 3-point line going more consistently, I do believe that he can be a good player, a really good player for Maryland. And people forget he was on first team, the all freshman team for the Big Ten, which a lot of people are like, oh, he shouldn't have made it. But that tells you something. If he made it, how the season that he had, the up and down season that he had, and I'm not trying to show shade at him, but like the fact that he made it on there shows that it's hard to be a freshman that contributes in the Big Ten. It's a tough conference. It's a lot of good teams. It's a lot of really good coaches and a lot of really good players, and it's not easy to succeed right away. And so Deshawn Harris-Smith, I think, can improve, and I think you're going to see a leap to next year. My college coach always tells me that the biggest leap for a player in terms of pretty much everything, skill-wise, mentally, everything, is from freshman to sophomore year. Guys don't get as much better as they're going to get freshman to sophomore year usually. I mean, of course, there's going to be exceptions to everything, but freshman to sophomore year is usually the biggest leap. So I think he'll make a really big leap, and I think we're going to need him to make a really big leap. And I think there's going to be more guys around him to be able to take some pressure off. I think that last year, Jahmir Young definitely had all the pressure on him, and I hope that Deshawn learned a thing or two from Jahmir Young. But I think that now that Jahmir Young's gone, But we bring in a lot of other players that are going to take pressure off of him. And if Deshawn doesn't play well, there's more guys that we can go to this year that probably we have confidence in, whether it's Rodney Rice, Jacoby Gillespie is supposed to be our starting point guard, Selton Miguel. There's more players that it's like you need to play well probably to stay on the floor. And I believe Deshawn Harris-Smith will do that. And I like him as a player, but he definitely has to play at a high level if he wants to start for Maryland basketball. Let's do some more esports rating. Let's rate our safety room on the new college football game. Today was the day where they released the cover for the new college football game. And I can't tell you guys how exciting I am. You guys keep telling me that you like when I talk about the rating systems and all those different things and what I think the players should be rating. So I keep doing them. We're in the off season. There's not a ton of stuff to talk about. So I think it's a fun topic to end the show with. And so let's talk about our safety room. I want to rate it. And so it's interesting because the new cover with Travis Hunter, Quinn Ewers, and the Michigan back Edwards, which I'm not saying he's an outlier on the cover, but he's kind of an outlier on the cover. It's like we got Quinn Ewers, who's probably like one of the leaders for the Heisman, and you got Travis Hunter, who obviously when it comes to college football is kind of Hollywood. He's the talk of the town. He's big time over there for Colorado. But Edwards, the Michigan kid, who's a really good player, don't get me wrong, but he's on the cover, and it's kind of like this guy wasn't even the starter. But I don't know. But basically, the new game is really like it's in works. Like everything seems to be going well. They just show the new packages and everything. And so I want to talk about the Maryland safety room and where I think everyone should be rated. I'm going to rate 3 players in our safety room. I'm going to rank the freshman, Brandon Jacobs, and the 2 starters. I think those should be our 3 probably highest rated safeties. But I do like this room. I think overall a safety room is one of the best parts of our entire team, if not the best part of our entire team. It could have our highest ranked player going into next year. And so I really do like the safety room. And I think if you had to give it an overall rating first in the safety room, I think it would probably land at about, I think I would probably have our safety room about an 83. I think it's a pretty good room. Of course, there's other teams in the Big Ten that have a really good safety rooms, but I'd like to think that we have amongst the best. And it starts with Dante Trader, who's really, I know, motivated to go to the NFL and prove people right or wrong, whatever it is. There's plenty of people that believe in him and think that he can do it at the highest level, but he put together a really good year last year, and I think that's going to show in the rankings, and I think he deserves like an 85. I don't think that would be crazy. I expect him to be an all Big Ten player this year, at least honorable mention, but I think he could get 3rd team all Big Ten, maybe even 2nd team all Big Ten. 1st team all Big Ten is always hard at any position because they're gonna love especially with more players now. It'll be interesting to see if they give more guys all Big Ten because there's more teams now, so more players. So I'm wondering how they do that. But I think Dante has really good instincts. I think his speed should be pretty high. I think his coverage ability, zone coverage ability should be high. Maybe he has laid the boomstick a couple times, but I don't know if his hit power will be really high. I know that's important for a lot of people that play the game, but I think he should have pretty high ratings and coverage stats at the safety spot. I think his tackling should be decent. And that's probably what I would say his lowest rating should be, his tackling. I've seen him miss some tackles, but I think that his coverage rating should be pretty high and pretty good for a safety. And I think he's going to be one of our highest rated players, if not. And I think an 85 suits him pretty well. And then moving on to Glendon Miller, who played slot cornerback last year, which could help with the ratings a lot. I think Glendon's could be a really good player in the game because of his 6'4" ability. Those are the type of guys people like to use her, to be honest. But Glendon Miller, I think, should hover around an 82. I think that's a good spot for him. He played really well in the slot last year for us, and he covered well. He got a couple of interceptions. I think his interception rating should be pretty high. And his length, you kind of like those type of guys in the game. And I think that his zone coverage ability should be pretty high. He's done a pretty good job in zone. I think his man coverage could be it's interesting with him. I don't think he's bad at man coverage, but I think he could struggle at times just because he's so tall, and those guys, sometimes it's harder to flip your hips and those type of things. But I do like him as a player, and I think about an 80, I think 83 suits him pretty well. And Brandon Jacobs, I do want to rate Brandon, the talented freshman. I think he should be our number one freshman in terms of ratings. And I was only going to do Glendon and Dante, but I thought I wanted to do Brandon as well. And I think Brandon deserves, like, they're going to disrespect the freshman. And if I remember from NCAA 14, like, if you had a 5-star freshman, he was probably about a 78, 79. Maybe he's an 80, 76. The 4-star type of guys like the Brandon Jacobs will be like a 72, 71. And I think that's where he should lie at a 72, 71. But he's a guy that if there's a potential rating, his potential should be like a 90. I think he has that type of potential as a player, and I think he has a chance to get to that. And I keep talking about him because I'm really high on Brandon Jacobs and his tape, his height, all that, and his ability. He's the type of guy that when I talked about in the first segment, recruiting, you need those type of guys. And he's the type of guy that we got that wasn't from Maryland, that was from Florida, that we were able to pull. And you got to be able to recruit out of state. And I really like him as a player. And I think he deserves a 72, which is really good for a freshman. That's all we have for today. Thank you for listening to Locked On Terps. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball. So thank you for listening to Locked On Terps.